Good morning. It's January 31st, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. Into January already. This winter, actually, I don't know about you guys. It's blasting by for me, and that's just fine because I got no use for winter. This show is going to be coming to you live every day, typically at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday. But after last weekend's, crazed protests and events, I shouldn't say crazed. They were very well controlled, actually. We'll go into that. There's just so much to go into. I had to start 10 minutes early to get all these guests in here today and cover it all. So kind of a special start time today at 11:20. I hope most people tuned in and caught this early, and then others can always review it later. It's available on audio and video for later watching. So this being live, though, comments are welcome. It's one of the great things about being live. Tell us what we can do better, what we've been doing terribly, that's fine, and what you want to see. Just keep it civil there in the comment scroll, and we can all have a good time together covering these issues. And I got a few guests today to cover. Jay Hill is going to come back because I just had him briefly last week at the end of the week. But he was a member of Parliament for a long time. And I really want a perspective from somebody who was in Parliament to talk about, a lot of things that somebody from Ottawa can cover with this protest. I mean, everything from the local congestion to layout of the land or other protests that he's witnessed up there in the past, because we're really into some unique times right now. And then I'm going to have Brett Wilson. People certain remember him from the Dragon's Den and lots of other media appearances and things such as that. He's going to come on and discuss a reward he is offering for the identity of a person with a Nazi flag at the protests. Yes, him and True North Center and Western Standard are all chipping in to actually find the identity of this clown who was wandering around in the background with a Nazi flag. So that'll be a really good conversation. And Brett's always very outspoken on issues in general, so that'll be a really good chat. And after that, I'm going to talk to John Carpay. We've had him on. He's from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and he's going to discuss the legal challenge they got going to Alberta's traffic courts. You won't have the right to fight tickets in court any longer if the government gets their way. As insane as it sounds. And John will be going into why he's pushing back on that and why it's ridiculous. So let's start, though, before I get into my rant. I know I got a big one today, of course, with our sponsor, Bitcoin Well. You've heard me go on about them a lot, but that's because they offer an incredible and good service. If you're interested in digital currencies, getting away from the central bank, getting away from government control, your money, this is the way to go. Bitcoin Well will show you how to get in. It's the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin. It means it's non-custodial. And what they mean when they're always saying that, and I keep saying over and over, it's because a lot of those services actually, they're kind of a middleman and they hang on to your money for a bit. And that's where you can get in some danger. They don't. You always control the Bitcoin in your wallet. These guys will set you up and show you how it's done. I'll just be a moment. We've got a sound issue going on. So it's the first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company. So we'll just pause one moment. There we go. No, I've still got a sound issue. But yes, thanks for hanging in there. And we're going to get to the show right away. That's part of why I'm starting early today, too. I got feedback. I'm going. Okay. Well, hopefully I'm coming in clearly to everybody. Okay. So either way, check out bitcoinwellonline.com. Thanks for your patience. The sound issue seems to have been rectified. If the sound goes off or anything, by all means, fire us a comment and we'll fix that up. Nico's in here. And just sorry it was feedback coming on my end. But again, these are the joys of a live show, having things go, it has its good and its bad. Okay, I can't start the show without talking about the incredible, peaceful, and effective protests held by the Truckers for Freedom convoy in Ottawa over the weekend. Thousands and thousands of protesters descended upon Ottawa for 2 days and got their message out with no violence, no property damage, and no arrests. Not one. And this is almost unheard of when such a large gathering of upset people gather, and it never happens when you see progressive protests. The messaging was positive, as was the general atmosphere and attitude. Thousands of Canadian flags were waved, and the anthem was sung with pride. To listen to Canada's established media, though, you would think you just witnessed the most disturbing and dangerous protests in Canadian history. The effort that the mainstream media went to in order to portray the protests in a negative light were just galling. I don't expect much of the tax-funded dying media institutions in Canada anyway, but they still managed to surprise me with how horrific and slanted they were last weekend. Because yes, I was stuck in the West, and I went back and forth watching Western Standard coverage and mainstream coverage, and I was just mortified sitting at home all weekend watching this because I do want to keep up with things. I wouldn't expect the media to be supportive of a demonstration challenging the very establishment that served them so well, but I'd hope to see at least a glimmer of journalistic principles, driving them to be at least a little bit fair. Well, those hopes were dashed. So I want to highlight some of the negative things that the media focused on, much of that media tax funded, by the way, then highlight the positive things that were ignored. So right off the beginning, Nico can pull up a Confederate flag picture. This surfaced, this went everywhere. And of course, I was watching Saturday morning, right at the beginning, this fool walked around and into the crowd carrying that Confederate flag. Every media outlet eagerly covered it. Every reporter went wild on Twitter with it. They felt justified. It was an attitude, of, you see, it's a movement of racist rednecks. Yes, they felt that was it. Look, I've been to many protests, and having members of the lunatic fringe show up is inevitable. You can't control it, and all you can do is try to limit it. This was one flag out of thousands. It was hardly representative of the crowd. But again, the media didn't want to project that message. What the mainstream media didn't report on was that the crowd, there was a video that went out of the crowd chasing that clown with the Confederate flag from their midst. Nico's going to play that video, and you can see this guy, they got rid of him.
Now he's going. Now he's gone. We called him out. He knows. He's going to hold his head in shame now.
You see, opponents to freedom, and that's who they are, the ones who oppose these rallies, want to, Trudeau, that imbecile, on his scathing thing, trying to paint this as all being racist and rednecks, and use things like that Confederate flag as an excuse for it. But none of them will be honest. None of them will talk and say, look at that. There's a video out there showing, because they're saying, no, nobody stopped him. Yes, they did. They did. And when you guys say nobody stopped him, you're lying. That's not right what you're doing. You're lying. The media is lying. Trudeau is lying. The group stood up and pushed that moron out of there. Sure, there's a few morons around, but they didn't have any of it. But the media, did they touch that? Of course not. No. So why overlook that? Next, this is where we came up next. The media was appalled because some protesters had hung a flag and a sign upon the Terry Fox statue. They called it a desecration. They were outraged. They never bothered to mention the adornments were removed within minutes. They neglected to point out that the same statue had been decorated with a rainbow flag by a Liberal campaigner. I don't see hanging things from statues as being terribly respectful, but it's hardly a capital crime. No harm was done to the statue, and the demonstrators even gathered. Here's another video that the media seems to have forgotten to play. They gathered around and scrubbed it down because they saw that people were kind of disgusted with that. Fair enough. And make sure that everybody saw this statue is even cleaner than before the protests began. So check this video out, because the media will never show it to you.
CBC. Let's see CBC show this.
Yeah, just like the commenter there. Let's see the CBC show this. Of course they won't. The CBC is in Trudeau's pocket. That's the reality of a state broadcaster. That's the reality when you get $1.5 billion from the taxpayers a year to project the government's message. It's ridiculous. Now, here's a picture of what a true statue desecration looks like when it's done by true violent and extreme protesters. Here, have a look at this here. There we go. Torn off the wall, covered in spray paint, intolerant racist messages on the back saying go home, to immigrants, and flags and spray paint draped over it. We saw less reaction over this statue desecration than what was going on with a flag and a sign being hung on a Terry Fox one. We've really got a problem of priorities. But no, it's not a problem of priorities. That's the bottom line. There is a media agenda, and it's sick, and it's wrong, and we've got to call it out. And then the media, here's the next one. They gleefully jumped on Edmonton MP Michael Cooper because some nut waved a flag with a hand-drawn swastika on it behind him during an interview. And you'll see this here. And as you can see, the headline, he's under fire for a photo of him near a flag burying a Nazi symbol. And unless Cooper has eyes in the back of his head, how the hell was he supposed to know what was back there? If we got that picture there, you can see where the original with the flag behind him. Either way, the flag was being waved behind him while there was an interview. There was just no way for him to possibly see it. So what do you think? But what's the legacy media say? Doesn't matter. They charged, tried, and found Cooper guilty. They're demanding apologies. They're saying he's in league with Nazis. Come on. Like, this is an outrage. People should be outraged on a number of things right now, one of which is how the media has been treating this event in the weekend. It's disgusting. And the CBC, yes, the state broadcaster Hannah Thibodeau, thought she'd found a travesty when she tweeted a picture of trash bags. Yes, a picture of trash bags in Ottawa. Now have a look at that. Wow. This is all over downtown, she says. Yeah, a line of neatly stacked trash bags after thousands of demonstrators have been there is apparently scandalous. Media never showed the video of the protesters volunteering to pick up the trash, of course. No, not at all. So check this video out. This is the one the mainstream doesn't show you. Look at that. How often do you see that at a protest with over 10, maybe 20,000 people picking up after themselves? Hell, it was probably cleaner when they were done than before they began. But did they get credit? No. You got the CBC showing a picture of trash bags, making it out to as if they made a mess. These are the most respectful protesters we've seen in Canadian history. And the media is giving the complete opposite reflection of that. And it's BS, and they've got to be called out on it, and that's what I'm doing. Now, we did have one thing that even bugged me. Some idiots, some losers, did a dance on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Two of them parked down on the steps coming up to it. What wasn't reported, though, was it was only a handful of these goofballs. It wasn't at the main protest, and that's part of why I want to talk to a member of parliament as well. Like, people don't know their way around Ottawa. That stuff's all close together, but that wasn't where they were protesting. This was off to the side, because I got a feeling other demonstrators would have slapped these guys in a line pretty quickly if they'd have been around. And it was disrespectful and it was wrong. But what the media is also not reporting is those demonstrators, the ones now, are guarding. They got volunteers guarding the memorial to make sure no other idiots do anything as stupid as that. Not to mention those ones dancing on that memorial were all wrapped in, of all things, Quebec flags. Boy, you know, usually the media, if they're on about flags, well, why aren't they saying it's part of a Quebec nationalist movement? Well, we can't talk about Quebec that way, can we? Now, finally, a true Nazi flag was spotted within the pictures. Nobody has a picture within the protests, nor does anybody know who was actually waving it. It's been, of course, widely reported. I'm going to be talking more about that with Brett Wilson, because him and the Western Standard and True North Center are offering a combined reward of $5,000 for the identity of this lone apparent Nazi. Look, nobody reasonable is supporting the extremists. That can be seen clearly when the gross filter of the mainstream media bias is removed from the coverage. These protests are making history and making change in a number of ways. The exposure of the mainstream media as being an irreparably sick institution, though, is not the least of those accomplishments. And I'm glad people are seeing that. So thank you guys. I can see a lot tuning in today. And we've had record numbers going on with the Western Standard because we have been covering it without going into that kind of crap. We've been giving you real news, and alternative media is clearly the way to go. We're seeing a sick and dying institution. So let's bring a real newsman in now to talk about the top stories that are going on in Canada. Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Cory. I got to admit, I watched some of that mainstream stuff on the weekend. I got so angry I wanted to throw my remote through the TV. It was ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. The fear and loathing that they were trying to create.
Yeah, I know. And as you can see, the vein in my head's pulsing as usual. It does every morning, but even more so after the weekend today. So thank you all for bearing with me. This is therapeutic for me.
Yeah, and the day started with a pretty emotional press conference from the Prime Minister, in which he just ripped into the protesters left, right, and center. Basically called them racist fearmongers, and says normal Canadians will not be coward. We will not cower in fear, in the face of all this racism. It's ridiculous. I mean, anyways, the story's there. All our readers can go and check out what our fearless leader is saying. Also interesting this morning, Cory, is an Ottawa councillor by the name of Matthew Fleury has ordered city solicitors in Ottawa to see if they can't freeze that GoFundMe that the truckers have going. That's raised $9 million as of this morning. The Ottawa councillor says it's not fair for the citizens of our nation's capital for their taxpayers to have to cover the cost of this event. And it is an expensive thing. It's costing more than $800,000 a day to police it. This Ottawa councillor wants the GoFundMe frozen to pay for it. Closer to home, Lethbridge NDP MLA Shannon Phillips has a message to Elon Musk, the world's richest man. If you remember, Musk last Friday tweeted his support of the truckers. Well, Shannon Phillips has not liked that, and she has basically told Musk to go forth and multiply with himself. So if anybody can do it, I'm sure Elon Musk can. And if you think the truckers are angry now, Cory, we may not have seen anything yet. The federal transport minister on the weekend saying that the Liberals are working together to get a interprovincial vaccine ban going. So if you want to drive your truck from Alberta to BC, you're going to have to be vaccinated. So Canadian truckers who aren't too happy about being able to get across the U.S. border, Cory, are going to be apoplectic about that plan. And I should have mentioned earlier that Trudeau held his press conference despite confirming he had COVID this morning. He got it off one of his kids apparently, and he's feeling okay and is going to work from home. We just don't know where that home is because he had to flee Ottawa on the weekend in case he might come face to face with a protester, and he just couldn't be having that.
No, well, and fair enough, and God knows I am no supporter of Prime Minister Ding Dong by any stretch of the imagination, but it is important to keep the Prime Minister safe in circumstances. Nobody quite knew what was going to happen before the weekend. I think most of us realized and thought it was going to be a peaceful and sane affair, but I think it's prudent to make sure that the Prime Minister is somewhere away from the action for that, though he hid out for the entirety of the weekend to come out with the vitriol and crap that he spewed today. That is something else. Again, I don't expect him to go walking among them, but boy, talk about disrespectful to a large segment of the citizens.
And it seems like we've now got some action going on down at the border with Coots. We're getting reports of a large convoy of RCMP vehicles, including SWAT vehicles and command vehicles, headed south towards the border from Lethbridge, and apparently tow trucks with them. What's happening down there, we'll be keeping tabs on. Our Mel Risden is on that, and we'll keep you up to date through the afternoon, Cory.
Great, thanks, Dave. Yeah, we'll watch that as it's breaking. We've been covering that Lethbridge crossing. It's kind of been overshadowed by everything in Ottawa over the weekend, but this is big. I mean, they've blocked the border for almost 2 days now, and I really want this to end well. I hope they kind of give some ground, because nobody wants to see the RCMP having to intervene. I mean, they're making a good protest and a good point, but there's got to be some flex, I think.
Yeah, our James Finkbeiner was down there on the weekend, and he was chatting with some ranchers who say, well, if the RCMP move in, I'm going to let my cattle loose on the highway. So tensions are hot down there. There's no doubt about that. And the truckers say they could be there for weeks. But that is a crucial entry point for Alberta. The Premier, Jason Kenney, has called for the blockade to end. I don't know how the RCMP are going to end it without the cooperation. I mean, these big giant rigs are, strewn across the highway. They're not that easy to move. And apparently we're hearing reports that some of the local tow truck drivers are refusing to join the RCMP, and they're not going to tow any vehicles. So it's going to be an interesting, intense few hours ahead down at the border.
It certainly will. Thanks for checking in, Dave. And yes, to everybody watching, always keep an eye on westernstandardonline.com. We put it out as it breaks, and we've had people down there. We had James Finkbeiner down there. I'll check in if anything breaks later, Dave. And otherwise, I'll see you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
But yeah, we got a lot of situations happening all over the place, and we can't forget about that one on the southern border. And I really want it to end well. I am getting a little concerned about it. Like, a different line has crossed when you block an international border. And I know you're trying to make a break, make a point, but you're going to upset a lot of the members of the public, and you're causing an international challenge. I'm not sure if this is the best strategy. Hopefully, some calm minds can prevail. The other ones are blocking Parliament. Who really cares? Those guys weren't going to do anything good anyways. We're not losing anything for slowing down the activities of Parliament, but the border is another issue. So we'll be watching that closely. Hopefully it comes to a good end. Before I get to my next guest, who spent a lot of time in Parliament, and that's really why I wanted to talk to him, I do want to talk about our next sponsor, though, quickly. And that's the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been sponsoring us sometimes. So we want to talk about rights. We want to talk about personal responsibility and allowing us to do our thing. Well, these guys stand up for that right to legally, safely, responsibly use firearms, whether it's for target shooting or competitive sports or hunting, even collecting. Why not? It's your right. It's your ability. But we have, of course, an ideological government that wants to take away that right. And the Canada Shooting Sports Association, they're standing up for your right to keep maintaining and enjoying the ability to use firearms. So check them out. They're at cssa-cila.org, and or just Google Canada Shooting Sports Association. And they're doing a lot for you. They got a lot of resources there. I mean, whether it's upcoming firearms shows or whether it's what was I thinking there? Firearms shows, and their 2 legal challenges where they have out on behalf of firearm owners to make sure you keep those rights. Get on there, take out a membership, help them help you. Okay, enough of that. I'm going to bring Jay Hill into the show here. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
Just great this morning. How are you?
Very good. I mean, I'm all wound up as usual, but that's what I do. That's why the show's called Triggered. If you ever saw me here all subdued, we got to wonder if Derek put something in my coffee or something, but so far, so good.
Well, I'd probably think maybe you were like the Prime Minister. You came down with COVID, for goodness sake.
Yeah, no, not yet. So, I mean, we talked briefly before the weekend, and we were looking for, we didn't know what was going to happen. We've seen now, I mean, thousands and thousands of demonstrators in Ottawa. They've choked up the streets. They're blasting their horns. They're holding fireworks, but still, it's been peaceful. There's been no arrests. There's been no property damage. I mean, it's been remarkably well organized, I think.
Well, yes, it has. And, kudos to the organization. And in particular, I want to praise my colleague, Tamara Leash. As you know, I've repeatedly said, as she has, that there's no direct link between Maverick Party and the convoy or the protest. But we certainly support their right to peaceful and respectful protest on Parliament Hill and indeed across the land. And we saw that this really struck a nerve with Canadians from all walks of life when people turned out by the thousands along the route of the convoy, all the way from Vancouver to Ottawa, and indeed even from Eastern Canada to Ottawa, to support the truckers and those participating in the convoy with food and refreshment and fuel and you name it. And of course, the huge outpouring in support financially that the GoFundMe page has witnessed. So even though Maverick Party is, as they say, repeatedly say, not directly linked, certainly because we believe so strongly in freedom, we do applaud the efforts of this group in bringing this attention onto not only the national, but the international stage, Cory. So it's been quite an event. It's unfortunate, of course, as these types of protests always seem to attract a few that want to use the efforts of the many to behave disrespectfully. And we saw that at the War Memorial in Ottawa. We saw it with some flags. We saw it the throwing of a beer can or pop can, whatever it was. And of course, the disrespect shown to Terry Fox's statue. Obviously, I think every single Canadian, other than the few that did those types of things, would be uniform in condemning those types of actions, as have the organizers of the protest. So I just think overall, when you track that many thousands of people, by and large, this has gone very well, and it's a real testament to the people involved And I might even add to the police and the security forces on Parliament Hill and in Ottawa. Kudos to them as well. I think everyone is doing the best they can under the circumstances.
Yeah, well, and that's part of why I wanted to talk to you is you spent a good number of years working in Parliament in Ottawa, and a lot of our listeners and viewers may not have. And I want to get a bit of that perspective because we have it's ongoing. I mean, they're not leaving yet. I mean, a lot of the people came out for just the weekend, but now it's still choked up with trucks. There's still guys staying. They're staying for the long run. They're certainly well funded in order to do so. I made a joke about it being good with Parliament being shut down, and actually that's not so much of a joke. I really do think we would do fine if they didn't do anything for a month. But how problematic might this be, say, for the other related businesses or citizens or people in the area? Like, again, hey, it comes with living near a national capital, but I don't think people understand just how dense it is down there and how much this protest is going to upset things.
Well, it's an interesting question, and having lived and worked in Ottawa for 17 years, I draw attention to the fact, obviously, that this is a very unique time, not only in the history of the nation and the world, but a unique time in the governing of Canada and, downtown Ottawa. My understanding is that the vast majority of government workers still are not working in their offices. They are still working from home, as indeed are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across North America working from home. So I don't know how disruptive this will be. Under normal circumstances, of course, this would be preventing people from getting to work. It would be causing a lot more disarray, if I can call it that, in government services. But in this particular instance, I mean, I don't have a clear handle on it because it's never happened before.
Yeah, it was quite an irony, I guess, that the very restrictions and limitations that the people are protesting against with the pandemic are what are easing to a degree the impact. I mean, Ottawa's learned how to operate at least to some degree without people being there in person. So it changes the outlook on things.
Well, as has every business across the land, as I say, in the private sector as well. I mean, there's been a huge adjustment to people working from home. I just want to add at this point that it's more than a little bit ironic that the Prime Minister allegedly has contracted COVID. He's triple vaccinated. We all saw that because he proudly posts that. So clearly, vaccination does not provide the ultimate protection from this virus, especially this latest strain. And so, as I said, it's a bit ironic that the Prime Minister himself is prevented from meeting with the organizers of this protest and trying to settle their grievances, which is his responsibility to do, I might add, as the leader of the country, because, he's while the rest of the world, certainly Europe, and indeed some of the provinces and premiers are relaxing restrictions and mandates, he's intent upon imposing this new one at the international border on the Canadian side, that is. Obviously, truckers have to adhere to whatever mandates the American government brings in. That's their right, and we'd never dispute that. But when it comes to the freedom of Canadians, that's a whole different matter.
Well, it's it. I mean, responsible government should change policy when the circumstances change. And I mean, perhaps they could be forgiven if they felt that vaccines were going to stop the transmission. So in that case, it makes sense perhaps to have vaccine passports. I don't want to start into the whole discussion of it or not, but when we've gotten to the point where it's clear that it doesn't stop transmission, then there really is no basis for this anymore. For a lot of those restrictions, you should adjust the policies, but they've dug in their heels, and there's where the problem comes, and there's where the standoff is. I mean, if they had clear evidence saying, look, this stops transmission, they would have a very strong case against the people protesting, but they're not doing anything on the transmission front. So these passports, these restrictions are pointless. Yet instead, what does he come out and do? He berates the protesters, calls them names, and goes back into hiding while carrying COVID, which proves that it doesn't bloody well stop transmission. It's just almost bizarre.
It is. That's a good word for it, Cory, bizarre, that the government would take this approach and expect that Canadians those vaccinated and unvaccinated would support this position. And then he throws fuel on the fire. He did a news conference this morning, albeit briefly. And apparently, I didn't see it live, but I've heard that he was accusatory towards those politicians, he didn't name who they might be, that would utilize fear in this particular situation. Well, I would allege, and I think a lot of Canadians would agree, that it's he himself, the Prime Minister of the country, for 2 years now, that has been using fear as a motivator to try and enforce the restrictions that he has deemed appropriate. And, that he's crossed a line many, many times over the last 2 years. And finally, I think this trucker convoy has been the flashpoint for Canadians to rise up and say enough, regardless whether you're like me, that have, weighed the risks and become triple vaccinated myself, or whether you have chosen to be unvaccinated, which is a very small minority of people not only involved in this protest, but people in Canadian society. So I don't think there's any dispute that vaccines work. They're historical. We can get into all sorts of discussion whether these particular vaccines, how effective they are, and whether they're going to work long term. We all hope that they will. But that's a different issue than the restriction on citizens' rights. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and that's the main issue, is choice. That's what we got to get to. We can all debate for a long time about the efficacy and wisdom of getting vaccines or not getting vaccines, and that's fine. I again feel that the vaccines do, reduce your chances of having a bad outcome if you get infected, and I've chosen to get it. But it has to be a choice. I can't say that enough times. And We're seeing the media, and we're seeing Trudeau, and we're seeing others trying to frame this protest as saying they're nothing but anti-vaccination people, and not in the slightest. I mean, I'm supportive of this protest, and I'm supportive of vaccines. I can walk and chew gum, even if our Prime Minister can't. And we can do both. It's about freedoms, and I'm getting tired of that narrative being hijacked like that. Why can't we have a rational debate on this? And the names he brought up, yes, he brought up O'Toole. He called him right out, and he brought up Maxime Bernier. So, I mean, this was supposed to be a statement on an issue, and he dove right in and politicized it. I mean, yeah, I had the mispleasure of sitting in the newsroom and having to listen to that voice of his. If anything, to change him out. I mean, I could live with 4 more years of Liberals. Just get a new leader. I can't listen to that guy any longer. But as you said, I mean, that's the best term. He threw fuel on the fire. Again, I don't expect him to capitulate. I don't expect him to go kneeling among them as he did with Black Lives Matters, but at least respect them. And he hasn't, not even in the slightest. And that is not going to calm the situation whatsoever.
No, quite the opposite, as you're saying, Cory. The other thing that we can't emphasize enough is that this particular truckers convoy and the protest that has resulted nationwide, and indeed internationally due to it, has been and is nonpartisan. It's not about attacking Liberals. It's not about Conservatives or NDP or People's Party or Maverick Party. This is non-partisan. It's people from all political stripes, all financial means, and that's why we've seen this huge growth in the finances to support this effort. Last I saw, it's now over $9 million that have been donated to the GoFundMe for this effort. It's because people have had enough. And so it's nonpartisan. The only person that's really making this partisan is the Prime Minister himself. And he's the one that's fueling yet again the fears. I agree with you that I got triple vaccinated because I believe that's the lowest risk approach for myself and my family and those around me. But having said that, I've upheld freedoms in Maverick's logo for a reason. We've always said this for 2 years now, that we believe in the freedom of Canadian citizenry. And this is a direct attack on those freedoms, and it cannot be allowed to continue. Why is it that European countries and the UK and our provinces and our premiers, people like Scott Moe, are lifting restrictions, and the Prime Minister is enforcing this latest one on the 10% of truckers that have chosen to be unvaccinated, when clearly vaccination does not prevent the contraction of the virus or the spreading of the virus.
Great. Well, thanks for coming in to check in with me today, Jay. We'll be watching with interest as things develop with these protests that are going to be going on for quite some time, obviously. So thank you again. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Me too, Cory. Just before we sign off, I want to echo the comments you made just prior to me coming on your show about what's happening at the border. Part of the reasons why the truckers launched this is concern for the supply chain, for the free flow of goods and services across the border. I would implore them, they've made their point, lift that blockade and allow goods to flow through the Coutts border entry point and resolve that without any further blockage or problems down there.
Great. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
All right. And as I talked with Dave, and as Jay was saying, and we've been talking with James, who was down there. I mean, it was really, and it still is remarkable with what was set up on the Alberta, the border with the United States down there in Coutts, and they're all settled in. I'd heard rumors that they're going to be getting some degree of funding to help keep them there, perhaps from the main truckers fundraising, which is over $9 million at this point. But as I said, I just want to see reasonable minds. I said earlier, and I hate giving them any credit, but if you look at these kinds of protests, if you ever see a union do it or, progressives do it, if they're going to block a parking lot or a business, what they do is they'll hinder the traffic for a while and then move aside though and let some through. And then hinder. It's annoying and it puts pressure on, but it leaves a vent. And they know that because if they completely stop it up, they will give the ammunition to their opponents to move in and take them out of there. So these guys at the border in Alberta, you got to move aside, let some traffic through. I mean, it doesn't mean you give up the protest, doesn't mean you stop your demonstration. It's just that you got to give a little, and it would be good for you guys. It will keep you there longer. I know the RCMP, who knows what they're going to be able to do when they get there. I mean, as Dave said, we got reports that tow truck drivers aren't even willing to intervene anyways. So even if they wanted to move these trucks, we're not sure how they could. The other aspect is, yes, we want to show how important truckers are, but if we really push the supply lines too hard, again, in the supply chains, you're going to lose that public support that we really need. I mean, that's the thing is more and more the public gets sick of this. They're going to push back, and these demonstrations are showing that. So by all means, do it, but keep it reasonably. Somebody's saying there's no trucks at the border. Okay, so welcome to the disinformation of social media. It is there. We've been reporting on it quite regularly at westernstandardonline.com. As Nico's just put the link in the comments area. You can go there, and that's the other thing. So we aren't, before Brett gets here, remind everybody, we aren't tax funded. We're not like the CBC. We don't get some of that fund that came out to a whole bunch of newspapers from the government, 600 and some million, I think it was. We rely on subscribers. We rely on sponsors, and it allows us to be independent. It allows us not to take part in this smear fest that the mainstream media has been doing over this last few days. So if you haven't taken out a membership already, by all means, go to westernstandardonline.com. Take one out. You can do it on a trial. Costs you less than the old newspaper subscriptions used to do in the past, and you'll get a product well worth your $10 a month. Just about everybody, when they try it out for the free trial for 2 weeks, then you can choose to renew and keep it rolling. Almost everybody keeps it. They realize you get exclusive access to the content from Dave and Mel and Eva and so many others out there, Linda Slobodian, Barbara Kay, all kinds of columnists. Get on there, take out a membership, help us, and then we can keep producing this content. Something else that was touched upon, and I think it's huge, is listening to the federal transport minister, talking about bringing in restrictions for interprovincial trucking. This is distressing, to say the least. Like, look how big this protest is already, because they've ruined and really harmed the livelihood of a lot of international truckers, the ones who go back and forth on the border. But now they want to actually take those 10% of truckers who aren't vaccinated and ban them from crossing provincial borders. I mean, for one, I'm not sure how the heck you're going to enforce it. Are you going to set up border crossings between the borders? As a supporter of Alberta independence, I might not see that as such a bad thing, because let's just start the work then on breaking this country up and putting those walls up. Because when you got border crossings between provinces, you're not much of a confederation anymore. But I mean, you think these protests are big now? Put that many more truckers out of work. Mess with the supply chains that much more. It's just astounding with this government. Why would you think, when you got this much difficulty already, this much pushback, You're going to double down? You're going to make it worse? You're going to inspire thousands more truckers to join these protests? Because that's what you'll do. And what are you doing? How on earth doesn't that mandate protect Canadians at all? What point in stopping truckers going from BC to Alberta to Saskatchewan? It doesn't matter. It's a ridiculous policy, a damaging policy. And they're considering it, and it's got me worried. I mean, how out of touch is this bloody government? Well, I guess, we shouldn't let them surprise you. I just got to have a look here. Okay, I just got a message from Brett Wilson saying calling in one. I think he's going to be coming into the show soon, so I will just keep rambling on. So he's getting there. I know he's out and about and tough to corner. So I'm just going to open my Twitter thing. We should see Brett quite soon. As I said, and just to frame that, so when Brett Wilson comes on, there was that flag being waved. It was a full-out. This was a full-out swastika Nazi flag. I mean, it was repugnant. 99.9% of the population is disgusted with that. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, many of them fought in World War II against that garbage. We family members got killed by those Nazis. It was one of the most repugnant modern movements in history. Between Hitler and Stalin, we saw sick things. So nobody really wanted to see those flags around there. And again, this was shown in those pictures, though. Isn't that interesting? Those are the only two pictures. Thousands of people there, thousands of cameras. Everybody carries a phone with a camera now. It's kind of like Sasquatch pictures all disappeared once the camera phone came along, too. No Loch Ness pictures, no fuzzy Sasquatches, no aliens. Yet nobody found this swastika moving around the crowd. Not a one. Strange. And we know why, because the crowd would have thrown them out in a heartbeat. They didn't even put up with that Confederate flag in there for a moment. So there's no way that was a part or representative of the people at the demonstration. Yet, of course, it was framed that way by people trying to frame the demonstration as being extreme. I mean, what a wonderful way to undercut a demonstration, then hold up a symbol as universally repugnant as a swastika. I mean, it just raises ire in everybody the second they see it. But it just doesn't make sense. I mean, we can't, and the fact that they came and went, nobody knows who they are. And I think the best way to expose this is to put out a reward. Let's see who it is then. Let's talk to them. Was this a real, genuine neo-Nazi, one of those 1 in a million? I mean, they exist. They're out there. There's always a few lunatics and losers. Or was it actually somebody trying to discredit it? Both are believable at this point, but we can know for sure it had no part of the rational people of that demonstration. So I see Mr. Wilson in the lobby there. We will pull him into the show and discuss this quickly here. Hey, Brett, how are you doing?
I am good. I'm in Maui, but trust me, I am following your social media feed and I'm following the convoy closer than anyone else in Maui.
Yeah, I was just down in Yuma, and much to Jane's chagrin, I still kept up on the Canadian news the whole time we were escaping the winter as well. That's just the kind of creatures we are. So, I mean, what brought us in today, though, to talk about was, that, as I said before you popped in, with that flag. I mean, that odious flag being, taken around out there, and those couple of pictures, and then it vanished. And you jumped in to help with, Candace and Derek and myself to say, hey, let's get a reward out there and see what's behind this, see who's done this. What inspired you to do that? I imagine the same as us, I guess.
Oh, very much so. I am absolutely. Oh, you know what? I'm in a hotel room. Let me cancel someone who just showed up. I'll be 1 second.
No problem.
20 minutes. Okay, I'm back.
That's all right. It's fun being live. We get our blooper reel for the end of the year is going to be magnificent.
Yeah, well, wait till my 6-month-old grandson comes cruising in. But anyway, I just put out to tweet, and it's the essence of the conversation we're having. Given that one bad apple apparently condemns the entire basket, according to legacy media, then a black-faced racist leader must mean that all liberals are indeed black-faced racists.
Well, that's right. This guilt by association ridiculousness. I mean, come on.
No, I mean, the stupidity. I actually gave the U.S. ambassador, Bruce Heyman, who I've spent a bit of personal time with, a bit of grief because he was condemning us for the Confederate flag. And I said, you've got Confederate flags flying in the United States. So don't condemn one walk around as part of this. It really isn't part of. Now, by the way, going back to the big picture, as far as I'm concerned, the convoys are about challenging Trudeau. It's less about vaccines. we're pro-vaccine, we're anti-vaccine, we're pro-mandates, we're anti-mandates, all those things. Ignore that. We are, as a nation, incredibly frustrated with the leadership and lack of leadership with Trudeau. And that's the way I've framed my support for all of the convoys. And again, there's been convoys obviously landing in Ottawa, but there's been groups gathering across our country. And why are they doing that? Frustration.
Yeah, and I mean, something that I'm glad I brought you on, as you said, we've been on the same page similarly in social media. We run in similar circles. Both of us have been unapologetic in our support for vaccines and feeling it's the right idea. We catch some flack when we say that, and fair enough. Yep. We probably will in the comments in a moment here. But I mean, it also, the people who support the restrictions, I think, get frustrated when people like you and I say that as well, because they're trying to frame this as being nothing but anti-vaccination people behind these protests who are pushing back. And that's not the case at all. A lot of the people are very supportive of vaccines. They're just tired of the mandates. And we have to differentiate between those things.
Yeah, I saw a former member of parliament, or an MLA, Thomas Lukasiewicz, condemning saying that, look, unless you're vaccinated, you can't drive a truck. Well, that's actually not true. For the last couple of years, clearly people have been working in trades of all levels. This isn't a white collar country. This is a white collar, blue collar, entrepreneurial country. And, you can't travel unless you're vaccinated. You can't go into restaurants unless you're vaccinated. So there's a bunch of reasons to be vaccinated relative to, yes, we have to wear seatbelts. Yes, you have to have a driver's license. Yes, you have to file a tax return. There's things that offend you, but you have to do them as part of living in society. And I'm really not troubled by the vax. I still remember taking a group of clients whitewater rafting in Ecuador. And we went to a travel clinic and we literally held our arms up and said, what do you got for us? We took every vax that they would give us, and because yellow fever, diphtheria, and blah blah blah. But we wanted to be protected. Now, does this vaccine stop transmission? No, but does it mitigate the seriousness? Yes. Does it mitigate transmission? Probably. Is it in our mutual collective common interest? It certainly appears to be. So I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have a problem with the vaccination. Our problem is with choice and rights and restrictions. Yes. That's the problem, and it shouldn't be that complicated. And I don't like the strategy of people trying to divide us, saying that we have to be one side or another on this sort of thing. No, we don't. We don't at all. And facts are changing as we're going along. I mean, the vaccines, as I said, haven't proven to be terribly effective in stopping transmission. So that should change some of the policy if the policy was based on stopping transmission. As we said, it does appear to be very, effective in reducing the amount of people going into hospitals. So it should still be encouraged. But maybe, restaurant restrictions, for example. I was traveling in the States. I didn't deal with any of those. Maybe we can look at dropping those. If it's not going to stop the transmission, now you're just harassing people, and it's making harder on small business owners to get people in and out of their establishment.
Well, certainly across the businesses that I'm platformed with, in terms of, I own a gym in Kelowna, and we had some members threaten to sue me for enforcing the requirement that they wear a mask. And I said, well, here's my address. Never heard a word. Never heard a word. But my manager, in terms of running the restaurant, we're probably one of the largest gyms in the country, close to 3,000 members. And all we've done is try to comply. That's all, comply. And you know what? The fact that we today have more members in that gym in Kelowna than we did before COVID. So compliance isn't offensive to those who want to be there. There's certainly those who've raised some noisy moments, not wanting to have to proof of vax, not wanting to wear masks. But again, we've just simply tried to accommodate, call it the vast majority. And that's really all that, I mean, you go back to the convoys that we're talking about right now. The compliance with, I get emotional when I watch people singing, chanting, carrying our flag, ignore the two flags that were stupid, but the bulk of so many people celebrating the fact that we're Canadian. And, it's almost one of the most powerful pro-Confederation moments that I've seen. When you think about, the Premier of Quebec saying, we don't do no pipelines. Well, we bring oil down the St. Lawrence, but we don't do no pipelines. Come on, there's something really wrong about that. It divides our country. This convoy has done more to bring people together than to divide us, except in the eyes of legacy media and a couple of senior Liberal politicians.
Well, that's it. And it's how I started my show with, myself going off and ranting, which is what I like doing. But I mean, about how striking. I mean, when and you know, you and I are getting a little long in the tooth, and we have seen a lot of protests over our lifetimes. When have we seen tens of thousands of people converge that peacefully? We're talking zero arrests, you know, none of the imagery of, and even on those other protests, it was outliers who often made the trouble, but you know, people being tear gassed or people pushing through barriers or assaulting police or spray painting. There was none of that. Like I've never seen such a large, respectful protest in my life, and they're getting not a bit of credit for it.
No, and it's disappointing. I mean, I saw a headline today out of the Toronto or the Ottawa police saying that they were investigating the people who had apparently urinated. Well, there's one or two. The people who had decorated, not desecrated, decorated the Terry Fox memorial. And again, I'm a huge fan of Terry Fox. Who isn't? But they didn't destroy, they didn't topple the Terry Fox. They put a flag on it and then it got removed and cleaned up. I mean, it's just the extremes of media, and I'm going to call it the legacy media, as we like to refer to it, has just been looking for headlines instead of celebrating what we've actually done as a nation coming together. I think I get thousands of people responding on social media, and there's a few haters. I get that. We all do. But the overwhelming, I've never seen the sort of responses I have to the support I showed to the convoy efforts. And again, the anti-Trudeau convoy efforts. Again, it's, yes, there's a mandate issue. Yes, there's vax issues. I get all that. But this is really about challenging Trudeau and his leadership, or fail in leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely morphed into something so much more than I mean, that was just the seed when the truckers were talking about the vaccine mandate to cross the border. But everybody now who's been discontent, who's been frustrated, I mean, we've never seen a fundraising effort like this before. You know, over 100,000 individual donors, because a lot of Canadians, they don't have the time or the ability to make it out there, but saying, well, I'll reach in my wallet and I'll kick in a few dollars here and there and help these guys out. Like, again, to be so dismissive of this, especially as a minority prime minister, you know, at least be respectful of these people. You don't have to cave to demands, but he just came out and ripped into them. And that's distressing. I mean, this is only going to make it worse. Well,
Cory, I also almost cried laughing. And when I saw the media condemning the fact that there was anonymous donors, anonymous. So what? Someone doesn't disclose who they are. And my comment was, they're likely NDP or Liberal and don't want their bosses and friends to know that they are also supporting it. Because within my circle of friends, everyone who donated would have put their name on it. I'm sure you did. I did. I mean, no issue whatsoever.
Well, yeah, that's part of a factor of this cancel culture world we have, too. Somebody might work in a workplace that has an employer or coworkers who would actually try to interfere with their employment if they saw that they donated to something like this, like the ability to kick in and not want to deal with the headache. That's not unreasonable.
There's no shame in being anonymous in that sense. It's a donation. And ultimately, it's not a tax-deductible donation, so the name doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's not your money. Get over it, you know. But there was a CBC host who actually implied that there was Russian interference in this. I mean, their playbook, they've lifted from CNN. I was flattened. Like, really, you went there, and even the guest, I believe it was a federal minister, was, you know, well, said, we've seen no evidence of that whatsoever. But why did you even tiptoe into there? I mean, it's just absurd.
Well, and for her to say that it's because of Canada's influence in the Ukraine that Russia would have pushed back. Well, let's remember that Canada is barely being acknowledged as a participant in the Ukraine. I mean, there was a call that Biden did apparently with a number of world leaders, and our leader, I think his name's Trudeau, wasn't even invited. We were irrelevant to the global issue in terms of what appears to be a horrible experience that we're going to all suffer in terms of what Russia is going to do to the Ukraine. But for her to bring it up, to me, that's patently, blatantly offensive.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous. I mean, honestly, where do you think you're going with it? But before we wrap up here, then, just to get back to where we started and remind people, I mean, we aren't kidding around. You know, the Standard will put in $1,000, Candace will put in 1,000. I think you offered a few thousand along with it. So if we find whoever that clown was wandering around with that repugnant flag, you know, hey, somebody, you know, let us know. You can pocket $5,000 and let's find out what really was behind that. That's all we want to know. We're not looking to hang and whip this person, though I suspect if they were exposed, they might not get a pleasant reception from the world at large. But, you know, let's remind everybody.
I can't help but wonder if again, the guy carrying the Confederate flag was wearing, it looks like swimming goggles with a face mask, not a COVID mask, but a full winter mask. And he was hiding. For sure he was hiding. He didn't want to know. That's truly anonymous if you want to go down that path. But I think we need to expose whoever was wearing or carrying the Confederate flag and the Nazi flag, and that's in our mutual interest to say, hey, enough is enough is enough. I mean, that sort of stuff. But we had 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people across Canada who were participating in varying degrees to this convoy. And the social media and the headlines out of legacy media were focused on two flags. Nonsense.
Yeah. And there's a great political cartoon. I think it's from a past event. I'm not sure, but I don't have it on hand, but it was an awesome one. You've probably seen it go around with all these positive protesters in the background saying love and peace and this and that. And then there's a few Nazis right in the middle, like 5 of them. And then there's 100 media members all focused on the 5 Nazis. And it's absolute hits it right on the head. I mean, it's ridiculous. The coverage is being given to this tiny minority when we should be celebrating, holy cow, we got over 10,000 people into one spot and they actually went out with garbage bags and cleaned up after themselves.
Yeah, that's never been done by the left. It's never been done by the people who are trying to undermine our infrastructure, whether it was Coastal Pipeline or some of the railway blockages and stuff like that. Nobody's ever cleaned up after themselves.
No. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on to talk to us, and thanks for kicking in on the reward. Maybe we'll actually sprout something. I mean, maybe it is a guy who hides out in a basement with some neo-Nazi friends, and those guys might rat him out for a few grand to buy some whatever those neo-Nazis buy, all 10 of them we have in Canada. But at least we could find out what was at the root of it.
Well, hopefully we're reaching the end of the blackface leadership.
I sure hope so. It's not doing him any favors this week. Anyways, it's good to see him scared. Thanks again for coming on, Brett. It's good to talk to you.
Appreciate the opportunity, Cory.
All right. Enjoy Hawaii there.
Thank you.
All right. So that was Brett Wilson. And, it was refreshing to get him on. As I said, we've interacted online and on Twitter many a time, and we have some very certainly similar points of views on a number of issues. And just getting, showing that, hey, we can push back, we're not putting up with having the legacy media control the narrative on this, having them try to paint this movement as a neo-Nazi, as a hateful, as a racist. I mean, all those words. And for those who can stomach it, or maybe if you're constipated and you want to induce a movement, watch Trudeau's conference, listen to it. And yes, you might throw up, but all the same, it really lets you know the deficit in leadership we have in this country. To have a prime minister at a time like this, with thousands of people gathered on the steps of Ottawa, with truckers on the border down there, to pour gas on the fire and call them all extremists, to call them hateful, to imply that they have anything to do with these handful of losers out there, who did go on to the Memorial Monument, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, things like that. Irresponsible, dangerous, ugly. And people are starting to call them out. People are calling them out. I see some commenters, some don't like Brett and some don't like his stance. That's okay. Lots of people don't like me, I assure you. You see my inbox some mornings. But I mean, we're speaking on, we got a lot of common ground on a lot of issues here, guys. And let's focus on those things. And what we can focus on right now, as I keep saying, and we want to keep focusing on, is these amazing, peaceful, effective protests. We just don't see this. We've never seen this. And it's great to see. So let's keep the message on there, and let's keep bypassing the mainstream media. This happened despite the mainstream media. You know that? They tried to ignore this protest at first. What happened? It got bigger. Then they tried to wrongly claim that the fundraising was going to be misappropriated. That didn't work. Fundraising kept going. It's up over $9 million now. Now they are wrongly trying to claim that it's just a handful. Well, no, they're saying it's a lot of extremists and intolerant people, and that's not working either. So let's keep pushing back, keep supporting alternative media, and we can change this narrative back. We don't have to listen to that garbage the CBC feeds us. So John's not quite in the lobby yet. So on the way to that, we'll get to an ad break. Speaking of that, we rely on sponsors. We rely on subscribers, and Bitcoin Well. They've been such a fantastic sponsor for us so far, and they are the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin. I'm going to tie this into some of the news that's going on. Dave mentioned it. I believe it's the mayor of Ottawa is trying to find a way, and I don't think he can, but still he's trying to find a way to seize the fundraising from the protest and take it to pay the bills in Ottawa for security and things like that. Look, you're the mayor of a city that's a national capital. Security is one of the bills you're going to have to pay, and it's more, above and beyond. Go after Black Lives Matter, get money out of them first, then come after this fundraising. But it does show the vulnerability of having a fund in a bank or in areas like that. I mean, the government will try and take it. They love taking our money. It's what they do. And they can't get at Bitcoin, can they? No, nor can Bitcoin well. It's non-custodial. You buy it through them, it's going to go into your personal wallet and stay there. And it's safe. You control it. And I know cryptocurrency sounds, digital currency sounds unusual and scary. It's not scary, but I mean, it's new. And we need to be led into how to get involved with it. So Bitcoin Well offers a free, they got white glove service, they call it, one-on-one consultations in Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, and Winnipeg. You can talk with a live person face-to-face and discuss how you buy Bitcoin, take control of your wealth. And they can do virtual consultations online too. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. And hey, take control of your wealth. Okay, so we still don't quite have Mr. Carpay here yet. I hope he's going to join us pretty quickly. And what John was going to be here to talk about today was we've written on that before. We've got the Alberta government has done a bizarre move there. They've changed the legislation. They were supposed to come up it was supposed to come into force recently, where you no longer would be able to go to traffic court to fight a traffic ticket. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it. You would have to go before an adjudicator. You'd have to pay a fee, almost up to $150 just to fight your own ticket. And if you lose, you're going to lose that too. So you're doubling down on it. And that adjudicator can't even say reduce a ticket, put off your payment period, things like a judge can do. All they can do is say thumbs up or thumbs down on it. So let's face it, it's a cash grab. It's trying to just take away and make it so inconvenient the ability to defend yourself in a traffic offense that you'll just reach in your wallet and pay the bill, give the government some more money. And John is pushing back on that, and he's with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. That's what they do. They've been standing up for some of the businesses who took a stand against vaccine mandates and passports and things like that, or the lockdowns. He's been standing up, for the pastors who've been arrested, the one up by Edmonton and some of the others. And he's been consistent in standing up for individual rights. So he's pushing back on this change to the legislation that we've got with the traffic courts, and it'll be interesting to talk to him about it as soon as he gets here. So where else do we want to go? Let's talk to some commenters. And Jennifer Schofield saying her husband and her son love cryptocurrency, but doesn't like Kenny either. Okay, that's fair enough. We don't have to like Kenny. Let's talk about Kenny anyway. I'm filling some time here. Where is he? He came out very strongly against the truckers parked at the Alberta-U.S. border. And again, I've been very critical of Kenny, but he's in a rock and a hard place here. This has turned into something of a federal issue, though there's provincial involvement in it too. I mean, I guess they're far enough back that it's not technically the border, but they are interfering with the border, which makes it a border interference. Kenny has come out in no uncertain terms and said it's got to stop. Okay, Premier Kenny, if you want higher ground, get rid of Alberta's vaccine mandates. Get rid of the passport. It's not doing anything. As I was saying earlier, all it is doing is hounding small businesses. It's getting on the case of restaurant owners, business owners. It's not stopping transmission. It doesn't do anything for transmission. We've established that. If you do that, maybe you'll have a higher ground when you talk to these protesters if you don't like them and say, hey, I'm backing off. We're coming back to normal. Hang on, guys. We'll sort this out. See, look at me. I'm cooperative. I want more freedoms. But Kenny's not showing any sign of that. He said, kind of, sort of, maybe, might lift some mandates on St. Patrick's Day. Well, okay, surely it's a coincidence that that's just before your leadership review, Premier Kenny? I mean, come on. If we don't need them now, get rid of them. And then you can say, look, farmers, truckers, people on the border, I'm working for you. I'm standing up for you. I'm tired of these mandates too. And I'm going to lobby on behalf of Alberta and the truckers and the farmers against this clown in Ottawa and make sure we can get our freedoms. But Kenny's been talking out of both sides of his mouth on this. I mean, he's been supportive of the protests, it seems, in Ottawa, but at the same time refuses to reduce the mandates that he is directly in charge of in Alberta. So, I mean, come on. Why would you expect Trudeau to take you seriously then if you weren't going to do it yourself? And I've gotten an email, by the way, just so you know, that, yes, John is going to be with us pretty soon, so you don't have to listen to me awkwardly babbling for too much longer. But there's always lots to go on about anyways. So, I mean, that's my advice to Kenny. And as I was saying earlier, though, I am worried. And as others are reporting, it sounds like the RCMP are going to be moving down there. I want to see reason. Like, we've had such great, peaceful, effective protests going on all weekend. Let's not see things go off the rails anywhere, whether it's in Ottawa, whether it's at the Alberta Coots Crossing. Let's keep it peaceful and effective. Stand your ground, but let's not have a big dispute. Let's not force officers to arrest people. Let's not force the towing. We can let a little traffic through and move out of the way, things like that. Use those tactics. But if you're completely intransigent, you aren't going to be able to effectively maintain your protest. Don't give him an excuse. So let's hope some reason prevails down there. I'm getting a little bit worried about it. I see John in the lobby there. I think we're going to add him to the stream quite quickly here if we can. And he might have had a sound issue too. Let's pull him in, see if he can hear me. Or not. Okay, well, we'll just hang on a little while with John there. He should be in the stream pretty soon. I see him waving, so I think he hears us. So we're going to talk with him quite quickly here. There we go. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, these live shows always keep us hopping there. So I imagine that's Joel there. Hey, good to see you too.
Thank you. Good to see you. Okay.
All right. So thanks for coming on. I've been kind of framing this for a bit here. You've got so many irons in the fire. It's hard to talk about which freedom issue you're pushing at any given time. But the most immediate was a column you had in the Western Standard, and it was about the loss of due process that we're seeing with the traffic courts from Premier Kenny. Perhaps we get you to expand on what you'd written about and what you're doing for it.
So the administrative penalties, the Provincial Administrative Penalties Act removes the presumption of innocence from Albertans, so that from the moment that you get a ticket from a police officer, you're not charged with an offense to which you plead not guilty, but you're getting a notice of penalty. You are presumed to be guilty. If you want to challenge that, the onus is on you to prove your innocence, and you have to pay a fee of $50 minimum, or as much as $150 if the ticket is for a higher amount. You have to pay to prove your innocence. This goes before a provincial government employee, not a trained lawyer, not a traffic court judge, but a provincial government employee is going to rule on whether you're guilty or innocent. And that provincial employee has to accept any evidence that the police give has to be accepted as if given under oath. And so it's heads I win for the government and tails you lose for the person that got their notice of penalty.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just absurd, I think, to most even casual listeners. I mean, I think part of what they use as a justification is that, well, driving isn't a right, so it's not a criminal sanction if we take it away, thus you don't need to go to court. I think they kind of used that when they reduced or gave so many abilities for seizure of your vehicle in impaired cases and things such as that, right?
Well, they started this, they rushed it through on the ever popular pretext of cracking down on impaired driving. And like you and like everybody else, I think impaired driving is a very serious crime. It's a very bad behavior, and we should have severe penalties. However, there's a problem here too, that the moment you are accused of being impaired, you are already losing your car for 3 months, and with very little you can do to defend yourself. It's not a contradiction to say that we should deal harshly with impaired driving, and we still maintain a presumption of innocence. That we can't just give the police absolute power to make these judgment calls, to just hand out fines left, right, and center, because then you get to a situation where if the police doesn't like your attitude or doesn't like your skin color, they can just issue you a ticket. and the onus is on you to prove your innocence. That's not the kind of society I want to live in.
No, I mean, the presumption of innocence is a basis for justice in every civilized society. I mean, your nation is not operating the right way if you're guilty until proven innocent. And even in the most minor of issues, that's one of the areas where you can't afford wiggle room.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the government argues, that, look, it's only traffic court. You're not getting a criminal record. If you're charged with a crime, shoplifting, impaired driving, if you're charged with a crime, you have all the right to a lawyer and the right to be presumed innocent. And this is only for traffic offenses. But here's the problem. They're going to expand this to every provincial offense. They started with impaired driving. Next, they're scrapping traffic courts. So all traffic offenses, you're guilty from the moment you get a ticket. And then after that, every provincial law on the books. The problem is you get a pretty nasty totalitarian state if the state can just casually hand out tickets to anybody and everybody all the time without needing to prove your guilt. That's the problem, especially today when there's so many laws on the books, right? You've got hundreds of thousands of regulations that you're supposed to be abiding by. So they plan to do this to all provincial offenses.
Yeah, this incremental loss of rights. I mean, it's scary and it's troubling. And what gets me is, I mean, you'd think the alarm bells would have gone off immediately when this was even pitched. But I think they're feeling emboldened. They've gotten away this last 2 years on so much infringement on our rights in general. They're realizing we're often prone to passively taking it. So you know what? Let's see how far we can get with this.
The governments will keep on violating our rights to the extent that we allow them to. And, I'm just really thrilled to see what's going on in Ottawa with the truckers convoy, people rising up, people protesting. I have no doubt that if the government already had some pushback on this Provincial Administrative Penalties Act, they were going to abolish traffic court and have a presumption of guilt on traffic offenses for February 1st. That was the plan. They were already getting pushback, and now they're saying, we're going to wait for another 2 or 3 months. Well, now we've got another 2 or 3 months, and if the MLAs hear from their own constituents that this is not acceptable, they will retreat and they will withdraw the legislation.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's in our court and it's up to us, and it has been heartening. I mean, never in my life have I seen at least conservative Canadians typically, or individual freedom-loving Canadians get up en masse like this and demonstrate as we've seen in Ottawa or even down on the border. I'm hoping, maybe that bold attitude that the government's gotten is going to be countered by a new empowered attitude of saying, hey, you know what? We don't have to take this crap. We can push back.
And there is a link between this and the lockdowns, because people, having been told that COVID would be like the Spanish flu of 1918 and would kill tens of millions of people around the globe and would kill, hundreds of thousands of Canadians, all of which has proven to be demonstrably false. But we got into the state of fear. We gave up our charter rights and freedoms. And then in that context, the government comes along and gets rid of the presumption of innocence. So it is tied together with just the whole climate of fear and the government taking advantage of people to really undermine our democratic, our free and democratic society, which is what really what our soldiers have fought and died for in the wars, is to preserve Canada as a free society.
Yeah. So are you guys challenging this then on a charter basis, or how are you trying to push back? Like, what do you have to wait till somebody's gotten one of these new tickets under the new order, or can you preemptively start pushing back legally on this?
It would be possible to do a preemptive court action. Usually, the best court actions are where the state is unfairly bullying somebody, picking on somebody, and then you act for that person. You generally have a better fact scenario. I'm in touch with other lawyers, not just our Justice Center lawyers, but with other lawyers across Alberta who are very unhappy with this legislation. And so we will be, if the government does not withdraw it, we will indeed be challenging it. and the likely way would be for somebody to get a ticket and be presumed guilty and have to go through this whole process. That would be our fact scenario to challenge the law.
Great. And as I said before you came on, actually, and as I said when you got here, you got a lot of irons in the fire. So while I got you, maybe I'll touch on a couple. One of the commenters did bring up Brian Peckford, and he's been working with you guys on a charter challenge right now, though. Can you expand a bit on what's happening there?
Well, I just want to say it's amazing how the government-funded media, which is not just the CBC, but also the Globe and Mail, the National Post, all of these so-called mainstream media, there's not one that has doing any coverage on the fact that the only living signatory to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, signed in 1982, Brian Peckford, at that time Premier of Newfoundland, the only living signatory to the Charter, is suing the federal government over violating the Charter, and this in the year when we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Charter. And you would think that somebody other than not only Western Standard and the Rebel and True North is getting media coverage in the United States. But yeah, we're taking the federal government to court over this utterly unscientific discrimination against people that have not had the COVID shot. And Brian Peckford, former Premier of Newfoundland, is our lead plaintiff on that.
Yes, and I mean, it has gotten some good alternative coverage. I hope we could get him on here to chat at some point. I'd really like to. We'll see. And he actually, I believe, went on Jordan Peterson's show even with them. That's a huge reach and says a lot. And what I love about that, though, as you'd mentioned, the mainstream media won't touch it. They've got their agenda. But boy, we've got a whole new media rising, not just us, but all over the place. They can't stop this from getting out anymore.
You know, you've got all of these American, when I Googled, Brian Peckford charter challenge, some of the key words, and there's a whole bunch of coverage, not CBC, National Post, Globe and Mail, but you've got, LifeSite News, Western Standard, the Rebel, True North, and a whole bunch of American media outlets are recognizing that whatever your position might be, maybe you think the vaccine mandate is a wonderful thing, you still have to recognize it's a significant news story when somebody's taking this to court. And I think the mainstream media will continue to lose more and more credibility because they're lacking in integrity.
Yeah, well, they shoot themselves in the feet, and it just it can't be stated enough. I mean, this is a man who took part in making history. I mean, if anybody can speak to what the intent of the charter was when they drafted it, when they framed it, it's the last living member and signatory of it, and he's being overlooked, and that's just ridiculous.
It's going to be an interesting court action. It's in the Federal Court of Canada. It might be consolidated with other actions. I know that the People's Party of Canada leader Maxime Bernier is going to court as well to challenge these regulations that prevent him from carrying out his job as a political party leader, from being able to travel around the country. And the onus is going to be on the government to bring the science to court. It'll be interesting to see what the government has to say when we know for a fact that the COVID vaccines are not stopping Omicron. We know for a fact that vaccinated people are spreading the virus. We see our Prime Minister putting himself into isolation after being triple vaccinated. He's admitting that as a triple vaccinated person, he's still spreading the virus. So there's just no scientific or medical basis for having any kind of discrimination against Canadians who choose not to get this particular COVID vaccine.
Yeah, this house of cards on this thing has to fall apart eventually. I mean, the Trudeau example is great, and I don't even know if he realizes that he just undercut his whole basis. But I mean, our personal liberties and freedoms as Canadians, I don't think in generations have we seen so much threat to it and so much infringement upon it as we have right now. It's certainly keeping you busy, and I really appreciate that. Are there other actions? I know you've always got a lot going on that you could give some updates on. I know you're speaking for so many different cases going on out there.
Well, the big ones are the federal ones. We're also the challenge is ongoing to that we filed quite a few months ago against the quarantine hotels or the prison hotels. So that action is moving forward. We are challenging vaccine passports in Ontario and gearing up to challenge them in other provinces. In Alberta, we've had Alberta Health Services keep on backing down on its threat to fire unvaccinated doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers. So we are suing Alberta Health Services, and we think that's part of the reason they're a little bit less bold than what they would be, because they're a government entity. They need to show the science as to why their policies are scientific. And they're going to have an awfully hard time coming up with the science in court when they don't have the media bully pulpit and they actually have to produce some real evidence before a judge.
Yeah, they don't seem eager to get to court. I mean, a lot of challenges I see, they just keep kicking it down the road and kicking it down the road, but they can't hide forever, just as even Trudeau poked his head up out of the gopher hole today briefly to berate protesters and then went back into hiding. So they're most certainly interesting times. So you guys are with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Let me make sure I got the URL right. jccf.ca, is it?
That's correct. And we're looking to hire more lawyers. So spread the word. If you know lawyers that want to work for freedom and justice and devote their careers to a very noble cause, we are receiving applications and looking to hire more lawyers.
Great. Yeah, I was just going to plug for donors, but I see you're looking for lawyers as well. But I mean, and you do need support as well. I mean, this is one of those things. If we don't stand up for ourselves, nobody else will. So yeah, at times, as we've seen them fantastically reaching into their wallets and helping out with the convoy for freedom going out to Ottawa. We've got to help out on these challenges, and you guys are doing such a great job there. So just all those listeners, check that out, jccf.ca, and see how you can help John and all those excellent lawyers with him stand up for our rights out there, because we're in some very troubling times.
Well, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And so it's great to see Canadians that are rising up and actively engaging in the political process, exercising their democratic rights and freedoms as citizens. And we're going to win for freedom because in the long run, truth will vanquish the lies and good will triumph over evil. And because there's enough people that are basically saying, look, it's better to die standing than to live on your knees. And so we're going to move ahead and we will restore freedom to this country, the freedoms that have been lost in the last 23 months.
Great. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate your determination and your work. And of course, for your joining me today to share that with you. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Thanks. I appreciate the invitation. Have a great day, Cory.
Great. Thanks, John. So yeah, and again, just that reminder to people, I see somebody typing, asking Brad Haugen, and I'll get to that video, Brad, honest. It was jccf.ca if you want to check those guys out. Or if you just even Google, I mean, your media, again, is quite slanted and, hard to trust. But if you look up John Carpay and the stuff they've done, they've been active for years now on these individual freedom cases. And as I said, like everything else, it's up to us. And it's like John said, we have to stand up for ourselves, and we're doing it. I mean, maybe we finally hit that tipping point, those docile Canadians, those ever polite Canadians, those yes or no sir Canadians have finally said, hey, back off. I have rights. The government has gone too far. They've extended too much. We need to put the brakes on here. And we're seeing it in Ottawa. We're seeing it at the Alberta border. We're seeing it with, actually, I'm not giving enough credit too. There were demonstrations in Vancouver. There was a big one in Edmonton. A convoy went up there. A lot of trucks. There's so many, it's hard to point out. There was a lot of people gathered in Calgary. I wish I had made it to that one, because as I said, some of the smaller gatherings I'd gotten frustrated with, because unfortunately some more zany supporters and so on tended to dominate the narrative. But I think we finally, as somebody else said, yes, tipping point. As Brenda said in the comments, we've hit that point where now the majority is taking over at these protests. I'm not saying they represent the majority of Canadians yet, but a large number of rational people are out there and pushing back and saying, we've had enough. And, the government has reached the line. We're done with it. Back off. And I'm loving seeing it. This is an attitude. People talk about, my independence history and things like that for Alberta independence, Western independence. And I still hold a lot of it because I think our system's broken, but that's another show altogether. But part of it was, and I wouldn't say I'm ashamed to be Canadian. There's a lot of great things about being Canadian, and Canada's done a lot of great things. But one of the low points of Canadianism was, and people see it as a virtue, is that ever diminutive Canadian politeness. That's that shuffling. I don't want to make noise. I don't want to make waves. I apologize. I apologize. I apologize. And no, you know, apologize. Sure, if you did something wrong. If you apologize for everything from a raindrop hitting a neighbor to, you know, somebody else's fart in an elevator, you're just being pathetic. And this propensity to just always be the dish rag is not served us well. But I'm seeing now, I mean, we're seeing that backbone. We're seeing those tough Canadians standing up. We are tough. We live through nasty winters. We work our butts off out here. We were extremely respectable in a number of wars. We still have some fantastic people working in the service overseas and peacekeeping and doing things like that. We still have a backbone hiding under all that trademark Canadian politeness. And we're starting to use it. And I'm really happy to see that. Let's get that Canadian toughness to the fore for a little while. Doesn't mean you have to be rude. It just means you don't always have to be docile. Push back. Because, you know, if you don't, someone's going to walk all over you. We're seeing it. So I'm watching these protests. We're watching them unfold. It's a bit of a standoff. I mean, it's going to be a lot to report on. And I got to remind everybody, keep watching westernstandardonline.com. Dave is putting news stories up as they break because we're at something of a standoff. And here's where I get a little bit worried with the protest in Ottawa and the one in Alberta. You always need an off-ramp, okay? We do have to make sure that there could be a resolution. Like the people going to Ottawa, and I'm sure they had well-intentioned, but say that memorandum of understanding, talking about the Senate and the Governor General and taking Trudeau out of power, guys, it's not going to happen, okay? And I'm not trying to crap on your movement. I'm just trying to crap on your demands. It's not going to happen. That's not reasonable. Justin Trudeau is not going to be taken from office. The only time that's going to happen is in the next election. I sure hope that's when it happens, and I hope it happens soon. But at times you got to come to a point of saying there's got to be a little bit of negotiation then. What are we talking about? Standing your ground on the vaccination requirements crossing the border. Sure, that's one. It's a demand, and it's one that Trudeau could fill. I don't think his pride will let him do it, but at least you've got one there. And you got something you can talk about, and it's reasonable. And maybe some other demands. And give Trudeau, or at least give the advisors who were smarter than Trudeau, some ammunition to say, look, maybe we can smooth this a bit and back it off. Because a protest, if you're intractable, if there's just no way that you can make a deal, then it won't necessarily be that productive. Eventually it'll fizzle out or perhaps go bad. And that's not good. It's not. I know you want to stay there a long time, and you probably will. But if there's no progress and there's frustration, that's how things can go off the rails, and we can lose all that fantastic ground we've been gaining so far. So it's difficult with a decentralized, truly grassroots movement like this. You know, I mean, people are coming for a number of reasons now and things, but hopefully the organizers can get together and come up with plans and make sure that the messaging stays positive. They've been doing magnificently so far. And this keeps happening. You know, we keep seeing more demonstrations across the country, and we will force our way out of these mandates and these restrictions, because as we're seeing, the government loves control. It wouldn't matter if there wasn't a COVID case for a month. They would still like to keep us locked down. They would. There's people who thrive on this. I mean, look at some of the vitriol on the internet. Control me, control me. Oh, it's pathetic. They remind me of the Gimp out of that movie in the past with his gag ball and his mask on. My God. Okay, you're a sub. You get off. You're a bottom. Fine, but leave me to be an individual to stand up for myself. We don't need the government whipping my butt on your behalf. So back off. Well, we're in a good place. Let's keep it reasonable. We're doing really well, and I want to see that trend continue. So before I let go, that was a really good show, and a lot of fantastic commenters and viewers. I appreciate it. Western Standard has been getting record numbers of subscribers and views. I mean, the gong was banging with a record broken the other day. So make sure, get on there, help us out. Like I said, just like helping John, and how we can help you, subscribe and share our stuff, you know. Share the Facebook page to friends. Yeah, you got to be a little bit of an evangelist. Nag people. Share the Twitter account. Come to my Twitter account, Cory B. Morgan. You really want to get scrapping with me, but that's my favorite playground. WesternStandardOnline.com. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble. We're on all those things, and keep spreading it. This is how we get around that rotten mainstream media. This is how we don't let them control the message. This is how we retake our freedoms. So thank you all for tuning in today. I got a great show tomorrow. I've got Crystal Whitvrongel from the Montreal Economic Institute coming on, and it's going to be a really good discussion with her. And Dave Bradley is going to come on. We're going to talk about digital currencies. And then, of course, as news breaks, as we get guests, we might have some more folks coming in as things go. So thank you very much. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow at 11:30.